Hello and welcome back to TableTop with Kevin. And today I'm showing a short tutorial on how to paint the Squighog's from your Squighog Boyz models and using contrast paints. And I'm using contrast paints to quickly get your Squighog's battle ready. I think this video will be an interesting one because I'll be showing you a wet blending technique to create the underbelly of the Squighog. And don't worry, I'll do my best to guide you through. Now if you haven't subscribed to the channel, click that subscribe button, and if you think this video is helpful to you, do give this video a like. And for now, let's get started. Now in order to quickly get your Squighog's to be better ready, I will not be touching on highlightings here. For the primer, I'm going to be using Wraithbone to prime my models, but I do think that any light color primers will work. So what I plan to do is to start from the inner parts of the Squighog and move our way outside. So we'll be starting on the tongue first. Now I'm following the box art a little bit over here, and what they showed is actually a blue tongue. So I chose a contrast paint ultramarine blue. Now do your best to be a little bit accurate here because you don't want to touch on the interior of the mouse, as the blue is very dark and may show through once you paint the interior of the mouse. Now that the tongue is completed, we'll let it dry and get started on the other parts of the Squighog. Now for the interior of the mouth, gums and a little bit of the lips area, I'm using contrast paint Volupus pink. Now don't worry if you touch the tongue area or the teeth. You can always cover up the tongue with more ultramarine blue, and for the teeth you can always use some layer paint Wraithbone. Now to do the leather portions of the Squighog, I'm using contrast paint Snakebite leather for this. Now just take note that the leather straps are actually quite thick, so make sure to get the size as well. I would recommend to do around 2 coats here because the leather will look a little bit too pale with just one coating. Now don't worry if you spill over to the body of the Squighog, we will be later touching up with Wraithbone layer paint, which I'll show you later in the video. Now for the saddle, I'm using contrast paint Black Templar. But honestly, I think that these orcs will use the hide of any animal to make their saddle, so I won't restrict myself to just using black. But I'm just making it a little bit easier for me and trying to add a bit of a different variety of colors for the model. So in the end, I just chose black. Now before we move on to the body of the Squighog, now is a good time to do your touch-up. So because we use Wraithbone to prime the model, I'm using a matching paint to do my cover-up. So in this case, I'm using the layer paint Wraithbone. Now the reason why we're doing this is because some of these contrast paints are actually quite translucent. And whenever you make a mistake and you use another contrast paint to paint on top of it, the bottom color might actually just show through. Take your time to slowly cover up those mistakes that you've made. It's well worth the time invested. Now that all the parts has been touched up, we can now move on to the skin of the Squighog. Now to create a nice transition between the red skin and the belly, the secret is to use contrast medium. For the skin, I'm using contrast paint Flesh Terrace Red, and for the belly, I'm using Gryph-hound Orange. So what you want to do is to imagine that the transition is going to be around this area, and you'll be drawing a line using contrast medium. Now here, as you can see, I use a little bit too little, but you can always use a little bit more than that. Next, take your red and work your way from the body and pull it towards the contrast medium line. Now don't overload your paint too much or take too long, as the medium can actually dry up. Once you reach the line, you want to start mixing it as much as you can in this swirling motion. The paints will then sort of dilute and have like this kind of diffused look to it. Now if it doesn't dilute enough, you can always wash a brush, quickly dry it, and take a little bit more contrast medium and apply it until it dilutes. After that, it's time to apply your Gryph-hound orange. You may want to add in a little bit more contrast medium again to the line first if it looks a bit too dry. Once there, you can mix it up in your swirling motion so that you can mix the red and the orange together. Like the red paint, don't overload your brush too much and work your way towards the diluted line. Right now, it may not be too obvious, but it will look better when it dries. So just a few tips. The diluted area that you've mixed is actually quite wet and may drip if you tilt the model in another angle. So you can either let it dry, or you can soak it up with a brush and wipe it on a tissue. But just be careful not to soak up too much of that. Another tip is that you want the diluted area to have a nice diluted but opaque color, and you don't want to see much of the base coating. In this case, you might see some of that beige Wraithbone color. Now if you have that, repeat the process on that area again by just using a tiny bit of red and orange paint to get that area covered up. Now that area where you can actually still see the base coating, that can happen if you soak up too much paint because of that pooling by blending too much, or you may have dragged your paint a little bit too far towards the medium contrast line. Now this wet blending technique will take some time getting used to, like knowing how far to pull the paint from or blending it well to create that gradient. Like this particular model that I'm painting on this video is my second squig, but I've gotten better on my third to sixth squig, which I did off camera and I'll show you at the end of the video. For the teeth and hooves, I'm using contrast paint Skeleton Horde. Now when I'm using Skeleton Horde, I'm applying a very thin layer to the teeth and hooves, as I don't want it to be too brown and muddy at the gum areas. Now we will actually realize that it's a good thing that we did a touch-up before we did these areas. If not, our mistakes will actually show through the Skeleton Horde. Now for the metallic parts, I never like to use contrast paints, so I'm subbing it out for the real thing. I'm using base paint Leadbelcher for my metals. I like to mix my Leadbelcher with around 1:1 paint to water ratio, and like to test out to see if the consistency is just right. Though I did not do this for my Squighogs, you can actually use Balthasar gold to break up the metals so that it will look a little less like a group of silver parts. But then again, I felt my Squighog body has enough variety of colors that I can still pull it off without Balthasar gold. But I leave that up to you. Now we want to provide some definitions on the metallic parts, and I'll be using the standard shade Nuln Oil. Right here, I can be a little bit more liberal to make sure that the Nuln Oil reaches all the crevices. Now for the last parts of the squig, the mouthpiece and the shoulder guards. This time I'm planning to use the color Gryph-Charger Grey. Honestly, after this, you can actually experiment on any other color to create a better contrast for your Squighog. Now just be a bit careful and not let it pull on all the flat surfaces, but you can actually drag it towards the nuts, the cuts and scratches on the mouthpiece. Well guys, there you have it, your Squighog in contrast paint. Here I'm just going to show to you what I did to the rest of the Squighogs, which I've actually painted the rest of the other 5 off camera. So stay tuned for the next painting tutorial where I'll show you how to paint the Squighog Boy and the aggression to complete the entire Squighog Boyz model. I hope you like this painting tutorial to help you quickly get your Squigs and your Squighog Boyz to be tabletop ready. Now if you think this video was helpful to you, do remember to give this video a like and subscribe to the channel. Thank you very much, and I'll see you next time.